Hi there, I'm Ben Jones. You're watching Dukascopy TV. The Bank of Japan have kept their monetary policy unchanged and will continue with quantitative easing. Joining me on the line to discuss this decision is Adam Slater from Oxford Economics. Adam, thank you for joining us again. Firstly, the Bank of Japan have kept things as they are and will continue with their current QE programme. What is your take on this decision and what else was discussed?
Well, in fact, they did make some small changes at yesterday's meeting. There's a very modest loosening of monetary policy announced, which involves the extension of their loan support programs. They left the main asset purchase program unchanged, but there was a small change to the loan support programs. It's not a huge change in itself, and the loan support programs are a rather modest part of the overall monetary loosening. I think the key positive that we take from that is potentially it opens the door to some more decisive action later on. In terms of other things that were discussed on the macro outlook, the Bank of Japan noted that a moderate recovery in the economy was continuing. They noted some upturn in demand ahead of the forthcoming rise in the consumption tax, and they said they expected inflation to stay around 1.25% for some time, and that inflation expectations were rising on the whole. So more or less what we would have expected on that side.
Now, we've seen a small amount of GDP growth for Japan recently, but as a whole, how is the economy performing? And in your opinion, have the Bank of Japan made the right decision to keep things as they are?
Headline GDP for Q was relatively moderate, but we think it understates the strength of the economy. Domestic demand rose quite robustly in Q4 by 0.8% on the quarter, or more than 3% on an annualised basis, and that was for the fourth straight quarter, so we are fairly encouraged by that. The weakness in Q4 was all about a big drag from net exports and specifically an unusually large surge in imports, which we think may prove to be erratic. So we think there's a certain amount of volatility connected to that number, and we are minded not to put too much weight on it at this point. Having said that, we have ourselves been calling for some expansion of the current monetary loosening program by the Bank of Japan beyond what is already planned, and we continue to believe that that makes sense. We expect the Bank of Japan to add around 15 trillion yen of additional asset purchases to its existing plans. Those purchases to take place later this year and into the start of next year, and we would expect that change to be announced at some point over the next several months, especially given that there are a number of downside risks to growth, not just the consumption tax rise, which of course is coming up very soon now, but also some external risks, potentially from China, from the weakness in emerging markets. And finally, because we think, looking at the monetary data from Japan, there are some signs that the upswing in monetary and credit aggregates might have been slowing over the last couple of months and may need some additional impetus.
And finally, if we can discuss Abenomics quite generally, it's been praised by some and vigorously scrutinised by others. Is Abenomics achieving the desired impact, or is the scrutiny justified?
Well, the government's policies so far have succeeded in giving the real economy quite a significant boost and in getting Japan out of deflation. But, of course, there's still a risk the economy could relapse into weak growth and falling prices if policy settings, monetary and fiscal policy settings, are not appropriate. So in that sense, continued scrutiny of the progress of Abenomics makes perfect sense, and we are, of course, ourselves in that business. I think they are aware of the need to carefully monitor the progress of the economy in response to the stimulus that's been applied. We remain reasonably optimistic, I think, that Abenomics' principal goal, which was to end deflation, will be achieved. I think if it has a big failure in its so-called third arrow, the structural reform element, where very little has been achieved in our view. Now, the third arrow is important not so much for the deflation issue, but rather for trying to raise Japan's long-term growth rate. It's a different goal, but it's also an important goal and one where at present there's not very much progress.
Adam, thank you very much for talking to us today. That is all we have time for, but tune in again to Dukascopy TV tomorrow as I'll be bringing you an interview on that all-important UK unemployment rate. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.